Flooding, earthquakes, and wildfires are among the natural disasters that have affected indigenous people living in California over generations. There are stories and teachings that tell of these phenomena, and Native people understood what we now call disasters to be a part of life and natural law. Consequently, all tribes had practices and ceremonies that helped their people make meaning of trauma and move through seasons of grief and loss. Natural disasters continue to impact Native communities, and the people continue to search for healing pathways. And though some losses are similar to those of past generations, today there are new forms of trauma, and tribal communities are searching to find ways to heal from both old and new threats.
It was really devastating. There were police, there was law enforcement, which was sheriff and local Oroville PD and CHP were here going up and down our streets down here with megaphones, and the fire department was too, telling us to get out. You need to get out now. It's an evacuation. It's mandatory. Felt like it was a war going on, like you would see in a movie when they're telling you to leave.
It definitely is quite traumatizing to see the violence, happening on social media. And so we had that connectedness, which was, seeing some of the violence and some of the brutality on Facebook. It almost made you feel like it was happening to you.
I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't even, go to work, go to school, all of these different things that had been so normal to me. It almost seemed like I couldn't do that anymore, or I was being disrespectful to my brother, that I had continued to go on with life. Every laugh was a spit in his face, that I could laugh without him here.
While many individuals and communities continue to use traditional healing practices, there are also modern resources that are being brought to bear when addressing trauma. These supports may include community wellness activities, telehealth services, support groups, and existing behavioral health services. But what if there are limited healing options in a community? And what if there is a surge of need for behavioral health resources during a community tragedy?
So I am Nikki Munholland, and I am the tribal administrator for the Cedarville Rancheria, and I also sit on the board of directors for Strong Family Health Center. In February 20th, 2014, during our first official tribal court hearing, there was a mass shooting in this room, and we lost 3 tribal members and our tribal administrator at the time. We had 2 other tribal members that were shot with serious injury. And that day we lost 20% of our tribe. And the fallout from that would be nobody could have ever seen anything like this coming. And we just were not prepared. Our community was not prepared. And I don't think we're done dealing with what happened that day, 3 years later.
When a tragedy impacts the community on a large scale and response resources are limited, it can tear families and communities apart, or it can bring them together to address recovery and healing. One way to promote community healing after a tragedy is to identify and train a local support network for providing psychological first aid, or PFA. What is PFA? Maybe you can liken it to first aid for physical trauma. First aid is an assistance given to any person suffering a sudden illness or injury, with care provided to preserve life, prevent the condition from worsening, and/or promote recovery. Similarly, psychological first aid can mitigate the long-term impact of trauma, promoting emotional healing. Certain conditions exist in Indigenous communities, which make psychological first aid an ideal choice. For example, there may be insufficient numbers of behavioral health providers. Providers serving Native communities often live outside of the community and may not be immediately available during crisis. Trust between first responders may not have been established and may be an issue during a crisis. In communities, there are often natural helpers with the heart and commitment to serve their own community. Training in psychological first aid is available to this natural support system. Existing behavioral health resources can be integral in coordinating and training community members in psychological first aid. The goal of PFA is to foster a climate and environment of safety, calm and comfort, connectedness, self-empowerment, and hope. These are all skills that can be provided by the community's natural helpers. Who should participate? The PFA network may include local behavioral health resources such as counselors, licensed therapists, teamed with the traditional and natural helpers in the community. Who are the natural helpers in your community? Spiritual leaders, wellness program staff, community health representatives, elders and grandparents, parents, adolescents, coaches and teachers, school support staff. What is your clinic or tribe currently doing to develop a preventive and postvention response in your community? There are resources to help.